Most people starting jiu-jitsu view getting the black belt as the end goal, but you'll often hear a black belt say, "This is just the beginning," or "My journey really started when I got my black belt." And I'm here to tell you as a black belt that the black belts are absolutely right. I think it's an exaggeration to say that, oh, my journey really started when I was a black belt. But I would say that black belt is kind of like you finally grew up through jiu-jitsu and you've become an adult. And now you're looking for your purpose within the sport and carving out your own path within jiu-jitsu. Right now, I'm a top 10 IBJJF ranked black belt. I've been coaching for more than 5 years, and I've been running 2 women's open mats every week for the past 4 years. And so I've seen a lot of people progress from white to blue, from blue to purple, from brown to black. After watching hundreds of people go through the process and going through the process myself, I started to notice that every belt is kind of like a stage of life. And if you understand what stage of jiu-jitsu adulthood that you're in, you might progress faster and you might struggle a little bit less, but I can promise you that you'll at least understand the context of your struggle. When you're a white belt, I compare that to being a baby in jiu-jitsu. You depend on other people to survive. Everyone's taking care of you. Most people are going easy on you. No one's really trying to hurt you. And mentally, you're also extremely impressionable. You tend to listen to anyone about anything just because you assume that they know more than you, and most of the time they probably do. I think it's really important that at this time in the white belt stage, you find a really good environment for yourself. If you end up in the wrong environment, you can spend years struggling. And if you're in one of those like hyper toughness first gyms where everyone's smashing each other, trying to prove something, a lot of the times they're shirtless, you might just think that's what jiu-jitsu is. You might think that jiu-jitsu is just about being tough. And jiu-jitsu absolutely is partly about being tough and persevering through tough times. But I would argue that jiu-jitsu, as a martial art, is mostly about technique. I was really lucky. From the very beginning, my coach always emphasized to me, he always said the highest compliment that someone can give you is that you are very technical. Even if you're losing a lot in the gym, just because you're a white belt, you don't have a lot of practice, being technical is the thing that's going to scale through time. Don't be discouraged by your techniques not working. As long as you keep focusing on skill development or being technical, then you're gonna be a good jiu-jitsu practitioner in the future. If you're a tough person, absolutely toughness can transfer to other parts of your life as well, and it will carry you through a lot of hard times. But when toughness meets toughness, or toughness meets someone who is very, very technical, it's going to be very painful to be tough. And honestly, just physically, it's going to be hard to sustain. If jiu-jitsu is something that, let's say it takes you 8 to 12 years to get to black belt of consistent training, that's a long time to be tough. But if you're technical, you can probably do jiu-jitsu for a lot longer than 8 to 12 years. Anyway, so going back to that analogy of white belts being babies, some babies are raised in tough conditions and some babies are raised in nurturing conditions. And of course, those babies can turn into good or bad adults either way. But we would generally think that if a baby is brought up through nurturing conditions, we're focused on learning and a healthy amount of criticism and discipline, but not an overbearing amount of beating them with toughness, then I would say the chances of developing a really healthy adult would come from that better environment. So if you're a white belt, a lot of people say it doesn't really matter who you learn from. And sure, anyone can teach you a hip escape or a scissor sweep, but the environment in which you are taught is going to shape how you see jiu-jitsu. And I really encourage you to find an environment that is nurturing in the way that you feel like is productive for you. Now, blue belts I like to compare to grade schoolers or junior high schoolers or middle schoolers. Now, not all blue belts are like this, of course. I'm sure there are plenty of really mature adult-like blue belts, but for me personally and many of the blue belts that I see at first in terms of their quality of jiu-jitsu and mindset in jiu-jitsu, you'll see that When someone transitions from white to blue belt, they start to think that they're awesome, and they're getting awesome, but they're not awesome yet. Oftentimes when you're blue belt, you know just enough to start to argue back and to have questions. And you can be annoying about it, and you cannot be annoying about it. I would say in most cases, you don't really understand anything yet, but you're starting to have questions, and that's a good thing. People are not going to treat you like a baby anymore. If you do something wrong or rude, you're going to be punished for it, either in sparring or just verbally. But at this point, you're starting to notice patterns and starting to build your own game, develop your own like jiu-jitsu personality. I would say blue belts or the middle schoolers of jiu-jitsu are absolutely equipped to help the white belts or the babies out because they're in that next stage of life. But generally, there is still a lot to learn. Purple belt is high school. At purple belt, I feel like people really develop a personality just like high schoolers. You start to see like the person they're going to become when they're an adult. You start to have a style, people start to recognize your game. You're not just doing like jiu-jitsu techniques anymore, you are expressing it, right? You can view yourself kind of like an artist. You might even have some unique takes on the game, and people will accept those unique takes as like legitimate. I feel like it's really important at purple belt, just like for high schoolers, to experiment and feel free to experiment and then refine what works for you. Brown belt is like college. You're getting ready to be an adult or a black belt, but you don't fully know what kind of adult you're going to be. When people go to college, usually they look to study something very specific in depth. I would say brown belt is very much about looking deep into your game and patching up the holes and preparing yourself for the reality of adulthood, the reality of black belt, where a lot of people are going to be looking to you for advice, not even just jiu-jitsu advice sometimes. And when you're a brown belt, you're trying your best to prepare for that. Just like college or being college age tries to prepare you for adulthood. Of course, it never fully prepares you, but you try to gather all the resources and education that you can so that when you become a black belt, when you become a jiu-jitsu adult, you are as prepared as you can be. So the biggest reason why I compare being a jiu-jitsu black belt to becoming an adult, let's say around the age of 22, which hopefully most of you who are watching are older than, that's the time where you have the rest of your life in front of you. Like once you get to black belt, you're a black belt forever. Try to remember the first few years where you became a fully working adult and you had so much of life in front of you and you had to decide what you wanted to do with it. Did you want to live like a quiet life and have a family? We can compare that to being a black belt who just wants to train and be happy on the mats. That's perfectly fine. I think a very legitimate way to live your jiu-jitsu life. Or do you want to be a competitor? If you want to be a competitor, it's a very hard path at black belt, but you can absolutely do that. Do you want to open a gym? Do you want to teach at someone else's gym? Do you want to be the person who just mat enforces? Do you want to be that fun black belt who rolls one time just to let everyone know that you still got it and then just enjoy being on the mats for the rest of the class? That's also perfectly fine. You have so many years of jiu-jitsu left, hopefully more years of black belt than you had from white to brown combined. I would say the most beautiful part about being a black belt is now you just get to do whatever you want and you make the most out of whatever goal you set for yourself. At black belt, you're not chasing belts anymore, hopefully. I mean, like you've got like 40 years until red belt, and I think you still have to make a contribution to jiu-jitsu or whatever. At black belt, you're not chasing like a material thing anymore, right? You are trying to find meaning. One thing I really like about this analogy of growing up through jiu-jitsu as a human growing from like baby to adulthood is that you really can't rush any of the stages of this journey, right? You kind of have to be a baby in order to be a grade schooler, and you have to be a grade schooler in order to be a high schooler, into a college kid, into an adult. And you kind of have to be a white belt to be a blue belt to be a purple belt. And that might be like kind of an obvious statement, but what I mean is you have to go through the process of struggling and survival, and then you have to go through the process of thinking you know something as a blue belt, and then realizing you actually don't know that. And then you kind of have to go through the process of developing your personality. as a purple belt, and so on. It really helps me personally to think of the jiu-jitsu journey this way because I have a lot of students who are not black belts like me, right? They're white, blue, purple, brown belts. And so teaching is not just about showing someone techniques that are appropriate for their stage of the journey, but also being able to empathize with how they see jiu-jitsu at that time. If I understand that a white belt is just surviving for a few months, then we can address how they're sparring and what they're actually processing in their mind differently than a brown belt who is sparring the same amount of time with the same people actually, but I know that they see that sparring round in a different way. I hope that this video helps you kind of understand where you are in your journey, and then also if you have any training partners or if you're helping coach somebody or if you're in a room full of people who are going through all these different things, that we'll all understand each other a little bit more and understand ourselves a little bit more.